What if I told you there are only a handful of movies in history that became so disturbing that one director had to stand in court and prove his actors were still alive? Another was banned or censored across multiple countries. One sequel became too extreme, even for censorship boards. One independent film felt so real that people questioned whether they were watching actual abuse. And another was declared by censors to be simply beyond acceptable. At first, these sound like 5 completely different horror movies, different countries, different directors, different stories. But once you start connecting the dots, a disturbing pattern begins to appear. Because these films weren't trying to create monsters, they were trying to manipulate something much more powerful: your own mind. And by the end of this video, you'll understand why these 5 movies still divide audiences decades later, and why every single one of them shares the same psychological blueprint. Chapter 1. They all broke the same rule. Most horror movies follow an unwritten agreement with the audience. They scare you, but they also protect you. There's suspense, there's relief, there's music telling you when to breathe, and eventually, the nightmare ends. These 5 films reject that agreement completely. Cannibal Holocaust, a Serbian film, The Human Centipede 2, The Bunny Game, and Grotesque. Despite looking completely different, they're all built around one emotion: helplessness, not fear, helplessness. Every character loses control, and so does the audience. Psychologists have known for years that human beings can survive fear surprisingly well. But when people feel trapped, unable to change what's happening, the brain reacts very differently. That's why these movies don't simply scare people, they exhaust them. Chapter 2. The secret ingredient. Each film used. Now, here's something even more interesting. Every one of these movies found its own unique way of making audiences uncomfortable, not by using the same tricks, but by attacking different psychological fears. Cannibal Holocaust feels disturbing because it constantly blurs the line between fiction and reality. The found footage style, the raw camera work, the rumors that the actors had actually died, and even the real animal killings, all combine to make your brain question what is real and what isn't. It doesn't feel like you're watching a movie. It feels like you're watching evidence. A Serbian film takes a completely different approach. Its disturbing power comes from moral escalation. The story keeps crossing ethical boundaries that most viewers never expect cinema to approach. Whether or not you believe its political message, the emotional reaction comes from constantly asking yourself, surely it won't go further than this? And then it does. The Human Centipede. Everything about its black and white visuals, its filthy environments, its obsessive main character, and its relentless atmosphere is designed to make viewers feel physically uncomfortable. It isn't trying to scare you, it's trying to make you want to look away. The Bunny Game chooses realism. There are almost no cinematic distractions, no stylish editing, no supernatural elements, just long, uncomfortable moments that feel painfully authentic. Because the lead actress drew from her own emotional experiences, many viewers struggled to emotionally separate the performance from reality. And that's exactly what makes it so unsettling. Then there's Grotesque. Perhaps the simplest of them all. Instead of relying on a complicated story, it removes almost everything. No mystery, no larger plot, very little hope. Just confinement, waiting, and psychological pressure that never lets the audience breathe. 5 completely different methods, yet all chasing the exact same goal: to make you stop watching as a spectator and start reacting as if your own brain is trapped inside the experience. Chapter 3. The directors weren't filming monsters. They were studying you. This is where these directors become fascinating. People often describe them as disturbed or obsessed with shock value, but their own explanations reveal something deeper. Ruggero Deodato said Cannibal Holocaust criticized sensationalist media. Srđan Spasojević described a Serbian film as a political allegory about exploitation and corruption. Tom Six defended the Human Centipede 2 as artistic freedom taken to its absolute limit. Adam Rehmeyer viewed The Bunny Game as an exploration of trauma and addiction. Koji Shiraishi stripped away traditional storytelling until almost nothing remained except psychological suffering. Different backgrounds, different intentions, yet they all rejected one basic rule of filmmaking. Most directors want audiences to enjoy their films. These directors wanted audiences to endure them. That's an enormous psychological difference. They weren't asking, "Can I entertain people?" They were asking, "How much discomfort can a human being tolerate before they emotionally disconnect?" The real experiment wasn't happening inside the movie, it was happening inside you. Chapter 4. Why they felt so real. Here's another pattern almost nobody notices. None of these films depend on ghosts, demons, or supernatural monsters. Instead, they rely on something far more frightening: reality, a documentary style, human cruelty, isolation, psychological manipulation, addiction, obsession, and power. These are things our brains recognize as possible. Psychologists often explain that the brain processes believable threats differently from impossible ones. When something feels realistic, your mind struggles to create emotional distance. That's why Cannibal Holocaust pioneered found footage, why The Bunny Game feels almost documentary-like, why Grotesque traps viewers inside ordinary spaces, why The Human Centipede 2 removes almost every trace of cinematic comfort, and why a Serbian film grounds its horror in human exploitation instead of supernatural evil. The closer horror gets to reality, the harder it becomes to convince yourself. It's only a movie. Chapter 5. Why the world reacted so strongly. Eventually, governments, censorship boards, critics, and audiences all found themselves asking the same question: where should art stop? Some of these films were confiscated, some were refused classification, others were banned or released only after heavy censorship. Not because every country shared the same politics, but because every society had to answer the same uncomfortable question. Can artistic freedom justify content that many people consider psychologically unbearable? Some viewers call these films masterpieces, others call them exploitation, and maybe both opinions can exist at the same time, because after looking at all five together, one thing becomes impossible to ignore. These directors weren't obsessed with violence, they were obsessed with limits. The limits of storytelling, the limits of censorship, the limits of morality, the limits of empathy, and ultimately, the limits of the human mind. Maybe that's why these films never disappear, not because they're the bloodiest, not because they're the most banned, but because they transformed the audience into part of the experiment. And perhaps the most disturbing thing about these movies isn't what happened on screen. It's realizing the directors may never have been testing their characters at all. They were testing us.